When I look at him, I feel angry. I feel like he's evil. I feel like he's a coward. I don't want to look at him. I have a lot of, I don't like the word hate, but there's a lot of hatred for him. And it just makes me upset looking at this person that's just so evil and that manipulated me so bad and took advantage of me, who I was, my heart. I do not like this man. I have 4 sisters. I'm the oldest out of 5. I felt like my mother didn't love me. My father was never there. It was a lot of chaos growing up in my mother's home. So, that played a big part in my life. And still today, it does. At the time I met Michael, I was 17 and he was 6 years older than me. The day that I met Michael, I was walking to the bus stop because I was on my way to work. And me and him got to talking and chatting. He was charming, nice, funny, and we just connected. He told me a lot about his childhood. I told him a lot about my childhood. I just felt like, we just kind of, in a way, trauma bonded, where we were just connected with just our past. That love that I was yearning for, I got it from him. I was happy with Michael. We did plan on having a family and just being together, get married, have kids, just be with that one person. And it was kind of just like us against the world. Looking back on it now, he knew how to manipulate me. And he knew how to just play on my mental and my heart. And that's what he took advantage of. But back then, I just felt like, oh my God, this man loves me to death. And then that's what made me so blind to everything. When I found out I was pregnant, we were both excited. I felt in that moment, man, I'm about to have somebody that's gonna love me unconditionally no matter what. So it was a good, happy time for us. The day my daughter was born was a little hectic because my mom was there and Mike always had an issue with my mother because of the things that I was tell him about my childhood. So it was happy that everybody was there, but he also had an attitude.
I want you to leave right now.
And an argument started between them. Michael was screaming at her.
Leave!
Just for it to get that far was just shocking to me. So I was really upset about that. Michael probably didn't want me to have those outside relationships, to have that outside influence. And I felt in a moment that was his way of trying to protect me from the things that I've told him that went on in my childhood. But looking back, I noticed every time we were around my family members, it just triggered him, where any little thing would just make him explode. This is a picture of me and my daughter. When I look at this picture, I just see the innocent me, the I want to be happy me, the naive version of me. I look so happy in this picture. Having my daughter was kind of the best thing that ever happened to me. I was just happy to have somebody that I can just love unconditionally. And I just always knew from the start that I was going to be just the best mother to her. I should have realized that it's not going to be that happy family that I wanted. When I look at that picture, I just feel like this is just a little girl that just didn't know no better. So when we moved in, we did a lot of decorating together, shopping for furniture. We were happy. We spent a lot of time with each other. And I was happy doing that. I guess the problem came in at when I wanted to do something different. I remember one day I wanted to go to my aunt's house. Michael didn't want me to go. It was this big back and forth argument between me and him. He got so upset, we were both yelling. And all of a sudden, he just got to punching the walls. And as he's punching the walls, all I could see is blood running down from his hands. And it scared me because I've never seen no one do something like that. He was just in a rage. That was the first incident of me seeing him get enraged like that. But I didn't have the fear of he was about to turn around and hit me. I felt like he loved me too much to actually hurt me. Come here. I was concerned about him. Was he okay? In that moment, I thought that I would just stay with him to make things better. If that was triggering him, let's just eliminate that problem. I was trying to calm him down and kind of de-escalate the situation, and then he eventually calmed down. Looking back, Michael was definitely manipulating me and controlling me. He took advantage of my kind heart, for sure, because after the argument, it's like now I know that pissed him off. So, okay, we're not gonna do that again. I never kind of fought to have it my way. I felt like he was doing it to scare me. But looking back on it now, it's like, if you love me, why do you want to be scared of you? At one point, Michael told me that he needed to go away on weekends to work with his family. He said that he worked with his cousin. I didn't question what he was doing. I just know he was bringing in a lot of money and he was taking care of us. One day he called me upset and he was saying that some lady stole something from him. And I asked him what was going on. What did she steal? And he got quiet for a second and then he told me it was drugs.
What?
And I'm like, that's what you doing? That's what you go on the weekends for? You know, I told him like, that's a dangerous life. And then the woman walked in to wherever he was at. And all I can hear is her screaming. You can hear like he's hitting her, like you can hear her scuffling and everything. And she was screaming. She was saying help. She was crying. And I'm just on the other end, just in shock. I'm like, what is going on? Hearing her scream for help and her crying. It's just, I don't know. It was just shocking to me. I do wonder, those weekend trips, was he robbing and raping? Was he killing people that we don't even know if he got caught? Like, all that went through my head because I really didn't know this man at all when I thought that I did. I thought I knew him so well. I was hysterical. I was upset. I had a black eye. When he looked at me, he seen my face. He was instantly upset. He was mad. He told me to stay in the car. He got out the car, and then all you heard was gunshots. Everything happened so quick, so fast. I was so scared. I've never been around a gun before, especially shots. And I didn't even see the gun, so he must have had the gun on him, because I've never seen a gun in our home, on him, around him. I'm not even sure where that came from. He shot up their house. He got back in the car. I didn't know what to say. He was really calm and quiet. I really didn't even ask no questions. I was still in my mind about everything that happened. I'm shocked, I'm nervous, I'm scared, because I'm like, what if somebody got hurt? Police just came from everywhere, all over the place. They were screaming for him to get down, and I was terrified. I went into a straight panic attack. I couldn't even breathe. And it was just the scariest thing to have like all these police out, all these guns out. They took Michael away. They put him in handcuffs, put him in the car. And the whole time I'm worrying about him. And that was my problem the whole time. Worrying about him and not myself. But I still stood by him. I was just determined to just making it work. At the time, I didn't recognize that he was putting me and our child in danger. One day we went to go visit my mom. Like I said before, Michael just always had an issue with my mother. When we were over there visiting, he just seemed like he hated her. And that's what led to them having an argument. And they were going back and forth. At that time, I'm like, it's time for us to go. As we were walking out the door, Michael said that he couldn't wait to see her in her casket. And at that time, I'm like, what? He told her that he didn't like her, and he can't wait to see her in her black dress in her casket. And I was really shocked, because it was, to me, I'm like, where did that come from? Like, because the argument wasn't that deep, where you would wish death on someone, because ultimately that's what he was doing. He was wishing death upon her. My mom never liked him from day one. Always said it was just something about him that she didn't like. So it's almost like everyone's seen what I didn't see. One day, Michael and I was having an argument, and as usual, any little thing is starting to ram him up, and it's a back and forth thing between him and I. And out of nowhere, he brings up that he got abused by a family member. And it just caught me off guard, because we wasn't talking about that at all. And I knew exactly what he was doing when he brought that up out of nowhere. He was trying to get me to feel sorry for him, trying to make the argument be done with by me sympathizing with him. And I think in that moment, I was getting to the point where I'm just getting tired of it. So I kind of gave him a, I don't care. And then he looked at me and he was like, you don't care? You want to know how I feel to get raped? He grabbed me. And then he pushed me down and he started to grab at my pants to pull them down. And I was kicking, and I'm like, are you serious? Because in my head, I'm like, what is going on? I was scared. Like, that was the first time I felt like scared of him. And I was crying. I didn't know what was gonna happen. And then all of a sudden, he just let me go. And when he let me go, I went into the room, and I got to crying. So that was the first time that I felt scared to go to sleep. It was just that fear of not knowing who was the man that I was sleeping next to at night. I feel like you never know a person, no matter how long you're with them. You never know a person. And to know that I was just laying and sleeping next to just an evil man. And I look back and it just blows my mind. He's capable of doing any and everything, so.
It's hard, right?
Yeah, I gotta take a break though. Okay. Because I don't want to cry, but just thinking about it. I just think about just the young me. And just seeing her, wishing she knew better. So, yeah. It's heartbreaking. You know? I'm gonna take a break. It's hard for me. Like I said before, I haven't allowed myself to really feel any feelings about this situation. So I have a lot of built up emotions. I haven't really grieved the situation. So when I'm talking about it now, this is something I don't talk about. And me just processing everything, it's put me back in those moments. And it's hard for me because I have disattached from it for so long. Due to the Michael situation and my upbringing has caused me to be really guarded and hold my emotions in a lot. So it's uncomfortable because now I'm being very vulnerable in this moment. And that's different for me. I was starting to feel like it just wasn't gonna work, no matter how much I've been trying to make it work. Just one thing after the other. I felt like I wasn't happy anymore. I know I wanted better for myself, for my daughter. That night that he could have raped me, I felt scared of him. And I've never felt scared of him. And the fighting was just getting worse and worse. And it's just like, I never wanted to live my life that way.
Michael?
So one day I just finally got fed up and didn't want this life with him anymore. And I told him that I was gonna leave. And he just went crazy. He just got to breaking up things in the house, throwing things around. He tore up the whole apartment. It was chaos. When he was doing that, I was in that corner just looking at him. I really didn't have anything to say. I felt like if I said anything, it was gonna escalate it more. There was just stuff everywhere, glass everywhere. And I just sat there because I just couldn't say anything. I ended up calling the police. They came, they escorted him out. I think he thought he'll be back. He's completely different from the man that I met. The man that I met was nice, kind-hearted, gentle, loving. Him today, I feel like he's a coward. He's a monster. He was just being really nice and sweet, kind of like how he used to be. He began to tell me, like, we should get back together, give him another chance. And I told him, like, I'm done. And he kept on asking. So I kind of said it in a real stern tone, like, I'm done.
I don't want to be with you anymore.
And he looked up at me. I mean, the coldest look I've ever seen. And he said, I'm going to make sure we're done. And then, hold on. Okay. So he said, I'm going to make sure we're done. And he grabbed me. And he began to choke me. And I could just remember my feet kicking. I'm not really thinking about anything. I just remember my feet kicking and kicking and kicking. And then he threw me on the floor. He grabbed me by my neck and he was like trying to like twist it hard, like to break my neck. And when I looked up at him, it was like nobody was there. It felt like time was moving so slow. Like I felt like, sorry, I can't even put into words those feelings. I felt like that this was it for me and I was gonna just be in this house dead and nobody would know. And all I can hear is my daughter screaming and crying in the background. I just hear her crying and screaming and screaming. I believe her crying snapped him out of whatever evil that was happening in that moment. And all of a sudden, he let me go. If my daughter wasn't there, I do feel like he would have killed me. To this day, I felt like she saved my life. I received a phone call from a private number. And I picked up the phone. I recognized the voice, and it was Michael. And he just was like, I'm gonna kill you, bitch. When he said those words, I'll kill you, bitch, I believed him. He just tried to. There was no doubt or question that if he had another opportunity, he would have. And I hung up. After that, I called the police again to report that he called me and threatened me. But later on, the phone rang and it popped up on the call ID Columbus Dispatch. I thought that they were calling to tell me that they captured Michael, to just inform me.
Yes?
When I picked up the phone, the guy on the other end asked me what was my thoughts about Michael being wanted for first-degree murder. He was so nonchalant that he probably thought I knew about it already. It's like my heart dropped to my stomach. I'm like, what? And he said, yeah, he strangled and killed a 19-year-old girl. It's a nationwide manhunt for him.
I have to go.
All I could think about is that he's crazy and he's about to kill me next. And then that was when the real fear really set in because I knew that he really wanted to kill me. So yes, I felt like he was coming for me. That night, I prayed the hardest I ever prayed in my whole life. This is a picture of Stephanie. When this picture was flashing on the news, I felt like she resembled me a little bit. I kind of seen that innocent me in her. It's sad. It's so sad. And it just seemed unreal. Like, I couldn't believe that this was my life and I was involved in something like this. And I hated that she had to meet this monster that took her away from her family. It's horrible. I definitely felt alone and by myself throughout that whole situation. Because it was kind of like this man is just, he can do what he want to do. There's no stopping him. When my uncle was, walking around with knives to try to, feel safe in their own home, I just hated to see that. I kind of felt like a burden a little bit, like I'm bringing all of this into their lives, disturbing their lives in a way. But I also was scared about what he's capable of doing and would he come back. I remember me crying and feeling like I'm so young, like this is my life, like this is my life. I'm supposed to hide the rest of my life. It just got to the point where it's just like, this is the time for me to choose me. And for me to choose me and feel safe and be able to live my life, he needs to be off these streets. And that's when I called the U.S. Marshal and I told him that I can help them find him. So throughout our relationship, he was a mama's boy and he would communicate and tell her everything. And I knew she knew where he was. I told her to tell Michael that I missed him and wanted to talk to him, and he called 5 minutes later. When he called, I asked him, I said, Michael, is this true? He didn't really say anything. I said, Michael, why would you do this? And then he said that I couldn't kill nobody that I love, so an innocent person died because of you. Something that today, it still bothers me. The only thing that really bothers me. And I get really emotional at this part because when I hear myself saying this, I automatically think about her, right? Because I feel like he didn't know her. My logic mind knows it's not my fault. I know that. But also the other part of me felt like he didn't know her. And I can't really even ever just say that part without having some emotion to it. I really detach from a lot of it, but that part always get me because I just think about her and just how innocent she was. She didn't even know that she was just probably in that danger that he's taking it out on her. And I know now that he said that to really ruin my life, honestly. I feel like he knew his life was over and he wanted to ruin my life with it. And for a long time, it used to just really eat me up so bad, where I felt like that she died because of me.
This is Stephanie Duchesne. She was found strangled in a vacant apartment on Morrill Avenue. Police have charged 26-year-old Michael Horton with Stephanie's murder. And there's a warrant out for him in Minnesota, where he's charged with choking an ex-girlfriend.
For the longest, I felt that guilt, that it wasn't about her at all. It was because of me. Everything is about me. He basically strangled and choked me, and then a week later, he strangled and killed her. I felt like she resembled me a lot, and I felt a lot of guilt because I did feel like it was my fault that happened to her, but it could have been anybody. So after that phone call, I think it was like 5 a.m. the next day, that the U.S. Marshal called me and told me that they captured him in Pennsylvania, hiding in the closet. Once Michael was captured, it was such a relief. I can get back to my life again. I thought it would be over once he went to jail. But when he went to jail, they submitted his DNA, and that's when I found out that he had raped a woman, and then he had charges for robbery. And I was sitting there thinking, like, I did not know him at all. What we had before and that person I seen, that wasn't him. Michael is a monster to me. I don't see him being nothing else. That's exactly who he is to me.
These are papers from the court transcript, from his sentencing.
Okay. I never read it. I want to read it.
Okay.
This is what he stood up in court and said. Stephanie didn't do anything to me. I was stressed out by my baby's mother. And he said several times that day that he was with Stephanie, he called her my name. It's like he wanted her to be me so bad. He wanted to kill me so bad. He's trying to justify in I can't with this. It's ridiculous to me. And he said, like, I wouldn't kill nobody I love, so an innocent person died because of you. It's just like reading stuff about him makes me feel like he really wanted it to be me. Reading through his statements just really point out the manipulator that he is and the liar that he is. And he would say anything to get out of any situation. There's no remorse at all from him. At all. So this is a photo of me and my daughter after Michael had murdered Stephanie. And when I look at this picture, it's, the still happy, smiley person, I'm gonna stop because I don't know, I'm such a crybaby. Okay. The fact that I'm not an emotional person and to get all these emotions going is a lot for me because I've been through a lot in my life and have not let things tear me down. So I don't deal with no emotions, really. I just hide them all. And when I looked at this, it was kind of just like the mask you always put on. It's emotional now, and I get so embarrassed about the emotions a little bit. because I feel so weak when I do it. You know what I mean? And I'm a strong person. But what triggered me is just like me thinking like, girl, you are not happy. Ain't nothing happy going on in your life right now. I'm smiling in this picture, but it was just a mask. I wasn't happy. And I just think back to just all the times where I just masked my feelings. My daughter, to this day, I would always say she saved my life. I'm just really thankful. I do feel like people should follow their instincts. And when you're so in love, you're just not seeing clearly. And they seeing them doing hurtful and harmful things to other people, and they feel like he's not gonna do it to me. To just pay attention to that, because that person is actually showing you who they are. Today, our daughter knows everything about him. She feels like it's wrong, but my daughter talks to him today, and she feels like it's wrong and horrible because it was her words. But I think also a part of her, like any kid, just see their parents as just being mommy and daddy. She has shared some conversations that they have had where he wanted her to come see him. It scares me because I know the manipulator he is. So just them conversating scares me because I don't know what he's filling her mind with, making her believe. I just don't know, and that's the scary part because I want to protect her.
What would you say to Michael if you had the chance?
I would tell Michael how Betty took away so many just years of my life. Even after the situation, all the pain and all the suffering I went through, I would tell him that he's a coward and I'll never look at him as a man. I would tell him he got what he deserved. And I know how bad he wanted to break me down with this situation. And, you know, I'm just a fighter. I've been fighting all my life. And I just won't allow this to tear me down. He wanted me to suffer like him. But at the end, he didn't win, though. My life is good. I have 3 kids. I'm married. I'm happy. I felt like after me going through this storm, God sent me the perfect man. He helped raise my daughter, and he has been there as her father. My daughter's 18, she's in college, and things are going really well for me. I don't look like what I've been through, and I feel strong, and I feel like I got a lot of power today. So life has been good.
Every abuse that an adult can put on a child, I dealt with from him alone. He's 100% a monster and a predator and a killer.
There's a profound and unsettling contrast that exists when horrific crime occurs in a place often romanticized as a serene paradise. American Samoa, an unincorporated territory of the United States situated in the heart of the vast South Pacific Ocean, is traditionally known for its lush emerald landscapes, its deep blue waters, and a vibrant Polynesian culture deeply rooted in the concept of family and profound respect for elders. The geographical isolation of the islands fosters a tight-knit community where everyone seems to know everyone else, and the social fabric is intricately woven with threads of mutual reliance and deep-seated traditions. In such a setting, the sudden eruption of premeditated, brutal violence does not merely break the law. It shatters a collective illusion of safety and deeply wounds the communal soul. The year 2015 brought a dark and chilling reminder to this island community that no geographical isolation, no matter how profound, can serve as an absolute barrier against the darker inclinations of human nature. This is not a story of a random act of passion or a sudden, explosive loss of control. Instead, it is a chilling narrative of calculated greed, a meticulously planned trap, and a shocking disregard for human life, perpetrated by those who had yet to fully step into adulthood. To understand the gravity of the tragic events that transpired in 2015, one must first deeply understand the setting and the environment where the crime took root. Tafuna is the demographic and economic heart of American Samoa. As the most densely populated area in the territory, it stands in stark contrast to the quieter, more traditional, and slower-paced villages scattered along the coastlines. Tafuna is a bustling hub of activity, a place where the traditional island way of life intersects heavily with the demands and rhythms of modern urbanization. During the day, the streets are alive with the movement of people, the commerce of local businesses, and the general, comforting hum of a community going about its daily routines. It is a place of continuous transit, of eager commerce and a vibrant life. However, like any urbanizing center around the globe, Tafuna possesses a distinct dual nature. When the sun sets beneath the Pacific horizon and the heavy tropical night falls over the island, the character of the environment shifts dramatically. The bustling streets slowly empty out, the noise subsides into a quiet whisper, and shadows stretch long and deep across the landscape. The lively daytime hub transforms into a patchwork of illuminated main roads and profoundly dark, quiet, and often ignored peripheries. Among these darkened peripheries lies the old industrial park area. Industrial zones, by their very design and nature, are constructed for mechanics of daytime labor, for heavy machinery, extensive storage, and industrial production. They are entirely practical spaces, structurally devoid of the residential warmth and observant eyes that characterize typical neighborhoods. When abandoned or underutilized, especially under the cover of night, these areas take on an eerie, desolate, and almost imposing quality. The old industrial park in Tafuna was no exception to this rule. It was a space characterized by oppressive silence, sparse and failing lighting, and a distinct, noticeable lack of casual foot traffic. It was an area where one would generally not venture after dark without a highly specific and usually necessary reason. This inherent desolation, this profound isolation located just a stone's throw away from the densely populated heart of Tafuna, made an absolutely ideal location for a trap. It provided the two most crucial elements required for a premeditated ambush: the cover of darkness to conceal the physical act of violence and the surrounding silence to swallow any desperate cries for help. The victim at the very center of this tragedy was a man who spent his twilight years navigating these dualities of Tafuna. He was an elderly taxi driver, a hard-working man dedicated to the grueling and inherently unpredictable night shift. There is a universal vulnerability associated with the profession of driving a taxi, a vulnerability that is often entirely overlooked by those who merely sit comfortably in the passenger seat. A taxi driver operates a highly visible business in a highly unpredictable environment. They are required, by the very nature of their service-oriented job, to pick up absolute strangers, invite them into confined, enclosed, and intimate space of their vehicle, and transport them to locations entirely of the passenger's choosing. The driver's back is perpetually turned to passengers, a physical manifestation of required but deeply risky professional trust. When this dynamic is placed specifically in the context of the night shift, the inherent risks are magnified exponentially. The night shift is a realm of deep solitude, where the driver traverses quiet streets, constantly fighting off physical fatigue, all for the sake of earning a modest, honest living. For an elderly man, this type of continuous work is physically and mentally taxing to an extreme degree. At an age where society generally expects individuals to be resting, to be quietly enjoying the fruits of a lifetime of labor surrounded by the warmth of their extended family, this man was out in the dark, expertly navigating the roads of Tafuna to secure his livelihood. The cab of his taxi was his workplace, his sanctuary, a small illuminated bubble moving steadily through the tropical night. The cash he carried on his person was minimal, merely the accumulation of small fares diligently collected over hours of endless driving. It was a humble, honest way to make a living, characterized by a quiet, unspoken dignity. Yet, This very vulnerability, an elderly man working entirely alone in the dead of night, in known possession of liquid cash, made him a prime target. In the cold eyes of those who value quick money over human life, the glowing light of a taxi sign is not seen as a beacon of public service, but rather as a glaring signal of opportunity. The perpetrators of this horrific crime were not hardened, seasoned criminals arriving from distant, anonymous shores. They were a group of local youths, young men who had grown up in the very same community they were about to brutally traumatize. This specific detail added a layer of profound tragedy and intense cultural shock to the overall narrative. In a Polynesian society that places paramount importance on the utmost respect, reverence, and care for its elders, the actions of these youths represented a complete and terrifying departure from foundational cultural values. The transition from youth to adulthood is often recognized as a turbulent period, marked by a search for identity and a natural testing of societal boundaries. However, the actions of these young men went far beyond mere youthful indiscretion, peer pressure, or standard rebellion. They crossed a severe boundary into calculated, unadulterated malice. They did not simply stumble into a crime of opportunity born of a moment's desperation. They actively and deliberately manufactured it. The most chilling nature of this case lies in the cold premeditation. This was not a situation where a simple fare dispute escalated wildly out of control, nor was it a panic-induced reaction during a spontaneous, poorly thought-out robbery. The group of youths gathered, deliberated, and meticulously formulated a plan with a singular, grim objective: to trap and rob a vulnerable target. They clearly recognized the inherent risks and physical limitations of their environment and sought to actively manipulate them to their absolute advantage. They intimately understood the layout of Tafuna. They knew exactly where the safety of the streetlights ended and the absolute darkness began, and they fully knew how to exploit the fundamental, trusting duty of a working taxi driver. The execution of the plan required coordination, deception, and a shared, chilling willingness to commit extreme physical violence. The psychological threshold one must cross to collectively plan a violent attack on an elderly, defenseless individual is staggering. It requires a complete and total detachment from basic empathy, a deliberate dehumanization of the chosen victim, and a ruthless prioritization of momentary, material gain over the absolute sanctity of human life. As the youths finalized their sinister plan, the elderly driver was likely just beginning his long shift, completely unaware that the familiar, well-worn roads of his hometown had been silently transformed into a hunting ground. The night air in American Samoa is typically warm and heavy, comfortably carrying the faint scent of the ocean and the ambient sounds of nocturnal wildlife. On this particular night in 2015, the peaceful atmosphere was about to be violently shattered by an act of ruthless, irreversible violence. The youths, acting as a cohesive unit driven entirely by greed, positioned themselves to initiate their deadly trap. They needed to secure a ride, to seamlessly blend into the ordinary role of passengers simply seeking transport home. This initial act of deception is perhaps one of the most sinister and unsettling aspects of the entire crime. They approached the elderly man not overtly as assailants, but convincingly as patrons. They heavily relied on professional obligation, his strong work ethic, and his fundamental, ingrained trust in his fellow islanders to lure him directly into their control. The specific destination they provided to the driver was carefully and intentionally chosen. They smoothly directed the driver away from the populated, well-lit, and secure areas of Tafuna, guiding him steadily toward the desolate fringes near the abandoned sectors of the old industrial park. With every single turn of the steering wheel, with every yard traveled further away from the safety of the main roads, the invisible trap grew tighter. The driver, focusing dutifully on the road ahead, navigating the progressively dimming streets, had his back completely exposed to the very individuals who had already coldly decided his ultimate fate. The enclosed, familiar space of the taxi, normally a safe haven of transport and lively conversation, was rapidly becoming a mobile, inescapable cage. The youth sat quietly behind him, armed not just with sharp, lethal weapons, but with a terrifying, unified resolve to use them without hesitation. The stark juxtaposition of the victim's innocent, hard-working diligence and the perpetrator's silent, predatory anticipation creates a deeply unsettling, palpable tension that hangs over the entire narrative. This tragic, fatal convergence of hard-working, dedicated elder and ruthless Calculating use highlights a deeply disturbing reality about the sheer fragility of safety in any community. It forces a tight-knit society to confront and ask agonizing, unanswerable questions about what precisely drives its own children to commit such unspeakable, violent acts against their own people. What specific breakdown in social cohesion? What severe erosion of moral boundaries leads young men to view the life of a grandfather as fundamentally less valuable than the meager, easily spent contents of a taxi driver's cash box? The horrific events that unfolded near the shadows of the old industrial park in Tafuna would not only tragically claim the life of an innocent, hard-working man, but would also serve as a harsh, permanent, and devastating awakening for the entirety of American Samoa. It would soon trigger a highly complex police investigation, uncover a desperate and ultimately clumsy attempt to destroy forensic evidence through fire, and ultimately lead to severe, life-altering judgments handed down in a solemn court of law. But before the distant police sirens wailed into the night, before the judge's heavy gavel fell to deliver justice, there was only the suffocating quiet of the tropical night, a solitary, illuminated taxi driving steadily toward the shadows, and a group of young men waiting in the back seat for the perfect, terrible moment to strike. The dark stage was firmly set in the isolated periphery of Tafuna, an island paradise about to be permanently stained by an act of profound, calculated, and irreversible cruelty. The journey away from the illuminated center of Tafuna and into its desolate industrial periphery is a transition that happens gradually, almost imperceptibly at first, before the darkness fully swallows the vehicle. For the elderly taxi driver, this route was likely just another quiet segment of a long, exhausting night shift. He navigated the familiar roads with a muscle memory developed over countless hours behind the wheel, his attention fixed on the sweep of his headlights against the cooling asphalt. Inside the cabin, the rhythmic hum of the engine and the faint, ambient glow of the dashboard provided a false sense of security, a fragile bubble of warmth moving through the heavy tropical air of American Samoa. He was a man simply trying to earn a meager living while the rest of the island slept, completely oblivious to the fact that the passengers sitting quietly in the back seat had already calculated the exact moment his life would end. The profound tragedy of this setup lies in the absolute asymmetry of awareness. The driver was performing a public service, extending a basic social trust to his fellow islanders, while the young men behind him were silently finalizing a predatory sequence of events that would irreversibly shatter that very same trust. As the taxi ventured deeper into the old industrial zone, the landscape outside the windows shifted dramatically. The scattered residential lights and the faint signs of late-night commerce faded away, replaced by the imposing, silent silhouettes of warehouses, storage facilities, and abandoned lots. This area, bustling with heavy machinery and laborers during the glaring light of day, transforms into a sprawling, shadow-drenched void at night. It is an environment completely devoid of casual witnesses, a place where the darkness is thick and the isolation is absolute. The youths had chosen this specific destination with a chilling geographical awareness. They understood that the physical environment itself was a crucial accomplice in their plan. The lack of streetlights meant their actions would be shielded from any distant onlookers, and the sheer emptiness of the industrial park ensured that any sudden noises, any sounds of struggle, would be instantly absorbed by the vast, uncaring night. The driver, following their directions, was essentially driving himself into a carefully constructed, geographically perfect trap. The physical dynamics of a taxicab inherently placed the driver in a position of extreme vulnerability, a reality that the perpetrators exploited with ruthless efficiency. The driver is strapped into a seat, his physical mobility severely restricted by the steering wheel in front of him and the door to his left. His primary sensory focus is forward, legally and practically bound to the road ahead. He cannot see what is happening in the blind spots directly behind his head, and he must rely entirely on the assumption that the people he has allowed into his personal space harbor no ill intent. The young men in the back seat, however, were entirely unconstrained. They had the luxury of time, darkness, and positioning. They could communicate their final intentions to one another through silent glances and subtle shifts in posture, synchronizing their actions without ever uttering a sound that might alert their victim. The tension inside the vehicle during those final moments must have been suffocating for the attackers, a mix of adrenaline and dark anticipation, while the driver remained in a state of calm, professional ignorance, completely unaware of the lethal weapons being ready just inches from his neck. When the moment to strike finally arrived, The transition from quiet transit to absolute, unrestrained violence was instantaneous and devastating. The attack was not preceded by a demand for money or a verbal threat. It was a sudden, cowardly ambush executed entirely from behind. The youths utilized sharp, lethal weapons, aiming directly and purposefully for the most vital and unprotected areas of the human body. They drove their blades into the elderly man's neck and chest with ferocity designed to ensure immediate incapacitation. By targeting the neck, they severed vital arteries and instantly compromised his ability to breathe, speak, or cry out for help. By targeting the chest, they sought to inflict catastrophic internal damage, ensuring that no meaningful physical resistance could be mounted. The sheer brutality of this methodology speaks volumes about the perpetrator's mindset. This was not a robbery where violence was a secondary, accidental outcome. The extreme violence was a primary mechanism of the robbery. They did not want to negotiate. They did not want to threaten. They wanted to utterly destroy the obstacle standing between them and the taxi's cash box. The interior of the taxi, previously a sanctuary of quiet labor, was instantly transformed into a confined scene of horror. The elderly driver, bound by his seatbelt and caught entirely off guard, possessed absolutely zero opportunity to defend himself. The physical mechanics of the attack made self-preservation impossible. Reaching backward to fend off multiple armed attackers while strapped into a forward-facing seat is a biological impossibility, especially for an older individual lacking reaction time and physical strength of youth. He was trapped in a nightmare he could not see coming, his life force violently stolen from him in the dark, cramped quarters of his own vehicle. The rapid loss of blood and the severe trauma to his vital organs meant that the struggle, if there was any at all, was tragically brief. The young men, driven by a toxic combination of greed and profound moral detachment, continued their assault until they were absolutely certain their victim was neutralized, reducing a hard-working grandfather to a silent, motionless figure slumped over the steering wheel. Once the violence ceased, a heavy, macabre silence descended upon the vehicle, interrupted only by the frantic, panicked movements of the perpetrators as they transitioned to the next phase of their plan. With the driver deceased, they immediately tore through the front of the cabin, their hands slick with the undeniable evidence of their crime, searching desperately for the night's earnings. The profound senselessness of the murder is crystallized in this very moment. The financial reward for this meticulously planned, brutally executed slaughter was nothing more than a meager handful of cash. It was the loose bills and scattered coins accumulated from short trips around Defuna, a sum so profoundly insignificant that it defies any logical comprehension of risk and reward. These young men had permanently extinguished a human life, destroyed a family, and forfeited their own futures for an amount of money that would likely not even sustain them for a week. The stark, horrific contrast between the ultimate price paid by the victim and the pitiful prize claimed by the killers underscores the sheer, unadulterated nihilism of the act. Having secured the trivial amount of cash, the youths were faced with the immediate physical reality of the body occupying the driver's seat. They needed the vehicle to escape the desolate industrial park, which meant they had to forcefully remove the man they had just murdered. With a callousness that further amplifies the depravity of the crime, they unbuckled the lifeless body of the elderly driver and dragged him out of the sanctuary of his cab. They discarded him on the unforgiving edge of the roadside, treating a human being who had spent his final hours serving his community as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to be tossed into the shadows. They left him in the dirt, surrounded by the oppressive silence of the abandoned warehouses, entirely alone in the darkness. There was no hesitation, no apparent moment of remorse, only the cold, mechanical execution of their escape plan. They slammed the doors shut, leaving the victim behind, and took control of the very vehicle that had been the man's livelihood, transforming it instantly into a getaway car. Driving away from the scene, the interior of the stolen taxi was undeniably saturated with the physical and psychological remnants of the murder. The adrenaline that had fueled their violent ambush was likely beginning to curdle into a raw, chaotic panic as the irreversible reality of their actions set in. They were now navigating the roads of American Samoa not as passengers, but as murderers driving a highly identifiable, blood-stained vehicle. They understood that the longer they remained in possession of the taxi, the higher their chances of being intercepted by local law enforcement. Furthermore, The modern understanding of forensic science, an awareness that permeates even the most isolated communities through media and television, dictated that the car was a rolling repository of their guilt. Every surface they had touched, every breath they had taken in that confined space, had left behind microscopic traces of their identities. They knew that abandoning the car was not enough. They had to actively destroy the physical environment where the crime had taken place in order to sever their connection to the victim. Their desperate need to erase their biological signatures led to a final, destructive act aimed at thwarting the inevitable police investigation. They drove the stolen taxi to a secondary, secluded location, attempted to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the industrial park where the body lay waiting to be discovered. Once they felt they were adequately hidden from the main thoroughfares, they abandoned the vehicle and initiated a fire, intending to consume the car and all the forensic secrets it held within its metal frame. The decision to use fire is a classic, albeit often flawed, criminal countermeasure. They hoped the intense heat would incinerate the blood evidence, melt away their fingerprints, and reduce any stray hairs or skin cells to unrecognizable ash. As the flames caught and began to lick at the upholstery, the young men retreated into the night, leaving the burning husk of the taxi to serve as a chaotic, fiery beacon in the darkness. The partial burning of the vehicle was a calculated attempt at absolute erasure, a desperate bid to ensure that the horrific events of the night will remain forever cloaked in mystery. The flames illuminated the surrounding vegetation, casting long, erratic shadows that danced wildly against the stillness of the island night. However, this act of arson, intended to be their ultimate shield against justice, was executed with the clumsy haste of panic used rather than the clinical precision of seasoned professionals. They failed to realize that fire is a wildly unpredictable element, and complete destruction of a modern vehicle requires a level of heat and time they could not guarantee. By setting the fire, they did not erase the crime. They merely added another layer of complexity to the crime scene, inadvertently signaling their absolute consciousness of guilt and their desperate, terrifying need to hide from the horrific reality of what they had just done in the dark. The discovery of the crime scene at the edge of the old industrial park in Defuna was not merely a matter of police work. It was a haunting unveiling of a reality that the people of American Samoa had long believed to be distant. As the sun began to climb over the horizon, the tropical light, which usually heralds a day of commerce and community connection, instead illuminated a tragedy that would leave a permanent, jagged scar on the local consciousness. The abandoned vehicle, partially incinerated and smoldering in the cooling dawn, stood as a skeletal monument to the night's brutality. When law enforcement units arrived, they were met with a scene of absolute, chilling precision. The scorched metal, the acrid scent of burnt plastic and fuel, and the silent, desolate surroundings created an atmosphere of profound solemnity. The responding officers were not just investigating a standard case of robbery. They were grappling with targeted, cold-blooded execution that demanded an immediate and exhaustive response from the entire investigative apparatus of the territory. The process of securing the crime scene was handled with gravity that reflected the severity of the loss. Every fragment of evidence, from the tire tracks pressed into the soft island earth to the subtle disturbances in the surrounding vegetation, was treated as a vital piece of complex, unfolding puzzle. The investigators understood that they were not just looking for clues to a robbery. They were hunting for individuals who had demonstrated a complete lack of human empathy. The forensic teams began their systematic sweep, fully cognizant that the perpetrators had attempted to use fire as a blunt instrument of erasure. However, modern forensic science is resilient. Even in a location as geographically isolated as American Samoa, the methodology of investigation remains rigorous. The fire, while intense, had failed to consume the entirety of the vehicle, leaving behind critical areas of the interior that held precious, microscopic secrets. Every speck of carbonized fabric, every partially melted panel, and every smudge on the remaining surfaces was meticulously collected, tagged, and analyzed. The investigation quickly transitioned from the physical site of the burned-out taxi to the broader, more complex task of reconstructing the victim's final hours. This required a delicate, methodical approach to engaging with the community. In a place as closely woven as Defuna, the loss of an elderly, hard-working member of the community sends tremors through every social layer. The police had to navigate the deep grief and the palpable anger of the local residents while simultaneously soliciting information that could break the case wide open. They canvassed the area surrounding the industrial park, reaching out to witnesses who might have seen, heard, or simply felt the presence of disturbance during the late-night hours. Every account, no matter how fragmented or seemingly inconsequential, was synthesized into a timeline. The investigators were building a picture not just of the crime, but the calculated movements of the assailants who had orchestrated the entire event from the shadows of the island's most familiar streets. One of the primary challenges for the police was the inherent difficulty of tracking individuals who had moved through the darkness with a level of local familiarity. However, this same familiarity became the perpetrator's ultimate undoing. Their need to plan, to observe, and to eventually execute the attack meant that they had existed within the visual field of their community before and after the event. The investigators focused on the logistical trail. Where did the group gather? How did they coordinate their movements? The pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce as witnesses stepped forward, their testimony providing the crucial missing links between the abandoned taxi and the group of young men responsible. The investigators scrutinized the movements of the suspects in the hours surrounding the tragedy, documenting the discrepancies between their alibis and the reality of their physical presence. The tension during this phase of the investigation was immense. The authorities were working against the clock, aware that in a tight-knit community, the threat of witness intimidation and the danger of suspects fleeing were constant, underlying realities. As the forensic results started to return from the laboratories, the evidence began to speak with a deafening, incontrovertible clarity. The attempts by the assailants to incinerate the taxi had backfired significantly. The fire, rather than erasing their biological signatures, had actually created a concentrated environment of preservation in the parts of the vehicle that were shielded from the heat. Forensic analysts were able to extract and process traces that were essential for identifying specific individuals involved in the attack. The match was definitive. The young men who believed that their fire-based cover-up would lead the police into a labyrinth of dead ends had instead provided the exact evidence needed to anchor them to the crime. The investigators, now equipped with this technological confirmation, shifted their posture. The investigative phase, characterized by cautious surveillance and meticulous data collection, gave way to the swift, decisive action of apprehension. The arrests were carried out with a level of coordination that signaled the seriousness of the situation. There was no room for error. The suspects had already demonstrated their capacity for lethal violence, and the safety of the community was a primary directive. As the young men were brought into custody, the reaction throughout the FUNA was a visceral mix of shock and profound sadness. The public, who had initially been unified in their mourning for the lost taxi driver, were now forced to confront the chilling, intimate reality of the perpetrators. These were not faceless, external threats. They were local youth, a reality that deeply fractured the community's sense of security and forced a difficult, painful dialogue about the future of their society. The interrogations that followed were intense and emotionally taxing. The investigators, having already gathered a substantial body of forensic and witness-based evidence, were able to systematically dismantle the fabricated alibis and evasions put forward by the suspects. The detail in which the investigators reconstructed the crime was staggering. They mapped out the precise route taken by the taxi, matching the timing of the vehicle's departure with the statements provided by witnesses. They created a spatial analysis of the industrial park, proving that the ambush was not a crime of sudden opportunity, but a long-planned, tactical engagement. Every aspect of the violence, from the initial deception of the driver to the final, callous act of leaving him on a roadside, was meticulously documented. The prosecution's case was rapidly solidifying into an unshakable narrative of malice, greed, and cold-hearted disregard for human life. Throughout this period, the family of the victim became the silent, suffering heart of the legal proceedings. Their grief was not a private matter. It was a focal point around which the collective conscience of American Samoa rotated. The investigators, sensitive to the immense burden resting on the survivors, ensured that the pursuit of justice was conducted with the highest degree of respect for the victim's memory. The internal psychological dynamics of the group of youths began to unravel as the weight of the charges against them became clear. The facade of unified strength crumbled as individual members began to face the absolute reality of their actions and the long-term consequences that were now inevitable. Some sought to minimize their involvement, attempting to shift the responsibility onto others, while others withdrew into a state of shell-shock silence. This fragmentation, while expected, provided further validation for the investigators' theories regarding the nature of the crime. The act was a group dynamic, a toxic synergy of bad intentions, and as the investigative pressure mounted, the group's cohesiveness dissolved. The police continued to piece together the remaining fragments, ensuring that no stone was left unturned, no participant left uncharged, and no detail of brutality left unaddressed. By the time the investigation reached its final stages, the narrative of the crime was complete. It was a story of a calculated trap set by those who had chosen to abandon the core values of their culture. The investigators had successfully navigated the complexities of forensic science, community engagement, and psychological profiling to bring the perpetrators to justice. The atmosphere in Tafuna, once marked by the immediate, raw trauma of the murder, began to shift toward a heavy, somber anticipation of the judicial phase. The entire territory had been put on notice that their isolation was no armor against the darkness, but that their institutions were strong enough to confront it. The work of the police had been thorough, precise, and unwavering, reflecting the collective resolve of a people who refused to let the memory of their lost elder be tainted by the cowardly actions of those who had sought to profit from his life. As the files were prepared for court, the investigators could look back on a process that, while born of tragedy, had adhered to the highest standards of justice, laying the necessary groundwork for a definitive and solemn response from the legal system. The nightmare that had begun in the quiet shadows of an industrial park was now moving toward the bright, structured light of the courtroom, where a final, irreversible judgment would be rendered. The investigative phase, while technically successful, was merely the prologue to the arduous and emotionally draining process of judicial accountability. As the case moved from the hands of the investigators into the domain of the prosecutors and the judiciary, the focus shifted from gathering raw, fragmented evidence to constructing a cohesive, legally airtight narrative that would hold up under the most rigorous scrutiny. The court system of American Samoa, a body tasked with the heavy responsibility of balancing the scales of justice within a small, deeply connected society, prepared for a trial that would define the moral boundaries of the community for years to come. This was not a trial about ambiguity. It was a trial about the existence of evil in a place that had long prided itself on harmony. The prosecutors faced a daunting challenge of presenting the raw horror of the incident without allowing the courtroom to descend into a chaotic theater of raw emotion, all while ensuring that every detail of the perpetrator's premeditated actions was laid bare for the judge and the public to witness. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was one of profound, heavy tension. The presence of the victim's family, sitting silently as they were forced to relive the most traumatic moment of their lives, acted as a constant, sobering reminder of the true cost of the crime. The defense team, tasked with the unenviable job of representing individuals who had committed a widely condemned act, navigated a landscape of extremely limited options. Their strategy, however, was fundamentally limited by the sheer volume of forensic evidence and the overwhelming strength of the prosecution's timeline. There was no plausible way to deny the physical reality of what had occurred, and any attempts to introduce alternative narratives were quickly neutralized by the precision of the forensic data. The trial became less about discovering what happened and more about the formal, public admission of the calculated, predatory nature of a youth's behavior. As witness after witness took the stand, the portrait of the perpetrators shifted from individuals capable of redemption to ones who had knowingly and cold-bloodedly chosen the path of destruction. The cross-examinations were clinical and at times agonizing. The prosecutors meticulously reconstructed the final hours of the taxi driver's life, utilizing the evidence collected from the industrial park to map out every movement, every decision, and every violent action. They highlighted the disparity in the age and vulnerability of the victim compared to the collective strength and malicious intent of the youths. The testimony regarding the planning phase, the way the group had gathered, discussed a target, and effectively weaponized the victim's own professional obligations against him, was particularly devastating. It systematically dismantled any argument that the crime was a spur-of-the-moment act of youthful passion. Instead, it painted a picture of a group that had sat together, contemplated their actions, and made a conscious, shared commitment to violence. This was the central point of the prosecution's case. The murder was not a byproduct of the robbery. The robbery was the excuse, and the murder was the inevitable, intended outcome. As the judicial proceedings continued, the defense attempted to bring in character witnesses, hoping to provide context to the upbringing and environmental factors that might have influenced the perpetrator's choices. Yet, in the face of the brutal, calculated reality of the murder, these attempts often felt disconnected and hollow. The courtroom, while committed to the principle of fair process, remained steadfast in its focus on the objective facts of the case. The testimony regarding the attempted destruction of the taxi through fire was particularly damning. It spoke to a level of awareness and consciousness that completely negated any claim of impulsive, mindless violence. By deliberately attempting to incinerate the evidence of their crime, the perpetrators had effectively acknowledged the criminal nature of their actions and their desire to evade the consequences, reinforcing the argument that they were fully aware of the severity of the life they had taken. Throughout the trial, the procedural requirements of the American Samoan legal system were handled with meticulousness that left little room for procedural error. Every piece of evidence was entered with careful scrutiny, and the judge ensured that the rights of both the victims and the accused were respected, even when the community's sentiment was overwhelmingly against the perpetrators. The psychological weight of the trial was immense. It forced the community to look at the faces of these young men, faces they might have seen in the grocery stores or schools of Tafuna, and reconcile their knowledge of these individuals with the horrific reality of their actions. The trial was, in many ways, an exercise in communal soul-searching. It forced everyone present to confront the fact that these were not monsters from a different world, but members of their own society who had made a series of choices that led them to the absolute limit of human depravity. The legal arguments were reinforced by a deep, unwavering commitment to the integrity of the judicial record. The prosecution's final arguments were a masterclass in narrative structure, tying together the forensic findings, the witness statements, and the inherent, cruel logic of the crime into a final, powerful demand for accountability. They argued that if the society would maintain its stability, its respect for elders, and its core values, the response to such an act had to be absolute and uncompromising. The defense, knowing they could not overcome the factual reality of the crimes, shifted their focus toward potential for future rehabilitation, arguing for the possibility that these young men might, at some point, come to understand the gravity of what they had done. However, in the face of the permanent, irreparable damage caused to the victim's family and the chillingly calculated nature of the murder, these arguments struggled to find resonance. The courtroom, in its silence and its solemnity, seemed to wait for the only possible conclusion, a sentence that would reflect the permanence of the life stolen. The deliberation period by the judge was a time of immense, palpable anxiety for everyone involved. For the family, it was a time of painful reflection and agonizing hope for a just outcome. For the community of Tafuna, it was a moment of suspended time where the question of what to do with the perpetrators became a defining issue of their social identity. The legal system had to weigh the desire for retribution against the necessity of institutional consistency, ensuring that the verdict was not merely a reaction to public anger, but a reasoned, lawful decision that would stand the test of time. The deliberation was a process of synthesizing the volume of evidence and the testimonies provided during the trial, ensuring that every angle was considered and every legal standard met. The resulting decision was not merely a judgment of individuals, but a statement on the sanctity of human life within the territory. As the verdict was being finalized, the tension in the courtroom reached a breaking point. The gravity of the situation was reflected in the expressions of everyone present, from the legal teams to the court staff. The system had functioned as it was designed to, processing the evidence, hearing the arguments, and weighing the human cost. The transition from the investigative phase to the judicial phase had been a long, difficult journey, one that had required the cooperation of the community, the persistence of the investigators, and the courage of the witnesses. The legal process had effectively stripped away the obfuscation of the crime, revealing the raw, unvarnished truth of the events at the old industrial park. As the court prepared to deliver its judgment, the focus remained on the victim, an elderly, hard-working man whose life had been traded for a pittance of cash, and the necessity of ensuring that his death would not go unanswered. The trial had been a monumental undertaking, an exhausting, rigorous examination of the human capacity for darkness and the societal imperative to uphold the light of justice, regardless of the difficulty or the pain that such a pursuit required. The courtroom, in these final moments, became a site of profound reckoning, where the past acts of the perpetrators would be met with the full, unwavering force of the law, setting the course for their future in the cold, confined reality of a life behind bars. The narrative of the case was no longer just about the tragedy. It was now about the definitive, irreversible, and severe application of justice, an essential, final chapter that would close the loop on a horrific, life-altering event in the history of American Samoa, leaving a permanent, indelible mark on the memory of everyone involved. The sentencing hearing served as the final, agonizing punctuation mark to a chapter of history that the people of American Samoa would likely never truly be able to put behind them. As the court reconvened, the silence in the room was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed down on everyone present. The judge, an individual tasked with the immense burden of translating the abstract principles of justice into the cold, concrete reality of decades behind bars, sat on the bench with a face set in a mask of stern, uncompromising solemnity. The perpetrators, once emboldened by their shared, dark resolve, now sat motionless, their youth appearing almost absurdly at odds with the gravity of the crimes they had committed. The courtroom had become a microcosm of the entire territory's grief and anger, a place where the moral order had been violently disrupted and now had to be forcefully, painfully restored to the only instrument available, the law. When the sentences were finally announced, there was no sound of triumph, no sudden release of tension. There was only a quiet, chilling recognition of the life-altering consequences that had finally caught up with the accused. The judge began by addressing profound loss suffered by the victim's family, emphasizing the dignity of the man who had been stolen from them and the irreparable void that his absence had left in the fabric of their lives. The words were chosen with precision, acknowledging the devastating impact of a crime that was not merely a theft, but an affront to the very foundational values of their community. The sentences, ranging from 30 years to life in prison, were handed down not with cruelty, but with an unwavering, clinical firmness that left no room for appeal or interpretation. These were not numbers pulled from thin air. They were calculations based on severity of the premeditation, the brutality of the execution, and the total lack of remorse displayed throughout the process. For those watching from the public benches, the pronouncement of these sentences was a complex experience. There was an undeniable sense of relief that the legal system had held firm, that the horror of what occurred in the industrial park was being met with proportionate, severe response. However, there was also a deep, lingering sorrow that the law could only provide a form of retribution, not a restoration. The victim would not return, his family would not be made whole, and the lives of the young men being sent away for 30 years or life were also, in a different but equally tragic sense, being extinguished. The court had fulfilled its mandate, but the sheer weight of the tragedy remained. The judge's final words, as the gavel struck the desk, signaled the transition of the defendants from the status of suspects to that of prisoners, their existence now confined to the sterile, regimented environment of a correctional facility, far removed from the island community they had so violently betrayed. The immediate aftermath of the sentencing brought a surreal shift to the atmosphere of Tafuna. The trial had occupied the public consciousness for months, becoming a lens through which the community viewed its own internal health and social direction. With the sentences delivered, there was a collective, uneasy exhaling, yet no true sense of closure. The prison sentences were long, spanning the decades, ensuring that the young men would be removed from society for the majority, if not the entirety, of their lives. This was the ultimate social exile, a forced separation deemed necessary to protect the community and to express the absolute, non-negotiable societal disapproval of such extreme, predatory violence. As the defendants were let out of the courtroom, they were effectively erased from the day-to-day life of American Samoa, leaving behind a silence that would take a long time to fill. The legal teams and the investigators, having carried the burden of the case for so long, were now tasked with the quiet, bureaucratic completion of their duties. The paperwork, the transcripts, the final inventory of evidence. All these elements were methodically organized and archived, creating a permanent, cold record of the events of 2015. For the investigators, this was the end of a long, emotionally taxing mission that had tested their capabilities and their own personal limits. They had seen the worst of what humanity could offer in the dark corners of the industrial park, and they had succeeded in bringing those responsible to account. The files in their possession were now more than just evidence. They were a testimony to the necessity of constant vigilance, the effectiveness of modern forensic investigative techniques, and the resilience of a small territory in the face of sudden, shattering trauma. The family of the victim, while having finally witnessed the delivery of justice, now faced a much harder, more private task of moving forward. The court process had, by necessity, forced them to keep the wound of their loss open, to analyze it, and to speak of it in public, formal terms. Now, they were left with the reality of their grief, a burden that the law could do nothing to lift. The support of the community, which had been so palpable during the trial, remained as a testament to the shared respect they held for the man they had lost. Yet, the finality of the sentences served as a boundary, a sign that the public discourse on the tragedy was coming to an end, even as their own internal process of grieving would likely continue for years. The judicial system had done what it was designed to do, but the emotional cost had been paid entirely by those who had loved a man who had only been trying to work a safe, quiet night shift in his final years. In the broader context of American Samoa, the case of the taxi driver in Tafuna became a defining moment of awareness. It was a catalyst for intense discussions about youth, education, economic opportunities, and the erosion of traditional values in an increasingly modernized environment. The shock of the crime, the fact that it happened to an elder in a place of familiarity by those who were members of the community, forced a necessary, though painful, reassessment of how the society was evolving. The courtroom had been the stage for the formal judgment, but the real impact of the trial would be felt in the homes, schools, and civic organizations across the island. The tragedy became a benchmark for measuring the success or failure of various social programs aimed at engaging and guiding the younger generation away from the lure of illicit, violent paths. The sentencing, therefore, was not merely a conclusion to a single horrific event. It was the start of a long-term societal response. The severity of the prison terms was an unmistakable signal of the values that the community intended to uphold. By choosing to impose such long, life-altering sentences, the court had reaffirmed the sanctity of the individual and the responsibility of each member of society to uphold the basic tenets of respect and safety. This was not a passive rejection of violence. It was a proactive, forceful assertion that the territory would not tolerate the transformation of its streets into hunting grounds. The courtroom had served its purpose. The judge had delivered the verdict, and the law had taken its course, providing a firm, resolute end to the legal narrative while leaving the community to navigate the long, complex process of healing. The finality of the sentencing provided a foundation upon which a more secure, more vigilant future could be built, even as it served to preserve, in the public record, the memory of the life that had been so cruelly taken in the shadow of the industrial park. As the courtroom doors finally closed, the echoes of the proceedings served as a reminder of the fragility of the peace they had lost and the enduring necessity of the justice they had fought so hard to reclaim, in a world that, even in the heart of the Pacific, was never truly isolated from the potential for profound, irreversible darkness. The finality of the courtroom verdict in 2015 did not merely mark the conclusion of a singular criminal investigation. It served as a permanent inflection point in the social narrative of American Samoa. When the heavy doors of the court finally closed on the perpetrators, they also shut on a period of relative innocence, leaving the island community to grapple with the aftermath of reality they had once believed to be impossible within their borders. The tragedy of the elderly taxi driver, so callously murdered in the shadows of the Tafuna Industrial Park, became a permanent fixture in the collective memory, a cautionary tale that stripped away any remaining illusions about the absolute safety of their island home. The passage of time has not softened the impact of the event. Instead, it has solidified it into a foundational lesson about the fragility of the social contract and the constant, underlying requirement for communal vigilance. The narrative of this crime now serves as a grim marker, a reminder that even in the most tightly knit, tradition-bound societies, the dark, predatory impulses of the human spirit can erupt with devastating, unpredictable force. The primary and most enduring reflection derived from this tragedy is a profound, unsettling shift in the perception of youth within the territory. The fact that the perpetrators were local, that they grew up in the same cultural environment as their victim, and that they have been steeped in a culture that explicitly demands the protection and reverence of elders, created a dissonance that proved difficult to reconcile. It forced the community to look beyond the immediate horror of the murder and into the deeper, structural questions regarding the influences acting upon their youth. It raised questions about the impact of rapid modernization, the influence of digital landscapes, and the shifting aspirations of generation that seemed increasingly untethered from the traditional, communal values that had served as the bedrock of their society. The murder was not just an act of violence. It was a symptom of profound, internal dislocation that required immediate and sustained attention. This realization prompted a slow, but significant shift in how American Samoa approached its social and educational responsibilities. The tragedy became a persistent, silent advisor in the halls of government, the classrooms, and the community centers, urging a more proactive approach to the identification and support of at-risk youth. The crime, by its very nature, exposed the limitations of traditional, informal social control mechanisms when confronted with the cold, calculated nihilism of those who had decided to break the law. It highlighted the urgent need for a more integrated, institutionalized support system that could reach individuals before they reached the point of no return. The memory of the taxi driver, an elderly man who was simply trying to survive the night through honest labor, became the silent standard against which the success or failure of these social initiatives was measured. Furthermore, the case fundamentally altered the operational reality for the workforce in American Samoa, specifically those who work in the service, transport, and night shift sectors. The vulnerability of the taxi driver, who was effectively acting as an independent, mobile, and unprotected service provider in the middle of the night, served as a stark, chilling reality check for others in similar positions. The community began to implement, both formally and informally, a new culture of safety and awareness. Taxi drivers, delivery personnel, and night shift workers became far more cognizant of their operational security, recognizing that the inherent trust they placed in their passengers was a commodity that had to be managed with newfound, protective skepticism. The shift was not one of cynicism, but of survival. The tragedy had made it clear that the price of ignoring one's own safety in an increasingly unpredictable environment was simply too high to pay. The tragedy also left an indelible mark on the landscape of Tafuna itself. The industrial park, once a symbol of economic potential and industriousness, became a site of sorrow, a physical location where the memory of the violence lingered like a cold mist. This spatial memory is a testament to the way that crime does not merely violate a person. It violates the space, the environment, and the sense of security associated with location. The community's relationship with its public spaces has changed. There is now a greater awareness of the areas where the light does not reach, a greater emphasis on infrastructure that promotes security, and a collective, if unspoken, agreement that such desolation, even in the name of industry, requires the constant, vigilant eye of the community. The land has been reclaimed, but the memory of the crime remains embedded in the physical geography of the area, a silent sentinel that warns of the consequences of neglect. Looking back, the case serves as a poignant reminder of the enduring, tragic cost of greed. The perpetrators, in their pursuit of a pittance of cash, a sum so trivial that it barely registers in the broader context of their own lives, sacrificed everything. They traded their freedom, their futures, and the entirety of their potential for a momentary, violent thrill, leaving behind a wake of shattered lives and a community forever changed by their actions. This, perhaps, is the most enduring and unsettling lesson, that the most horrific acts of violence are often driven by the most insignificant of motivations. The stark, irrational gap between the magnitude of the crime and the insignificance of the gain is a haunting reflection on the nature of evil, and it stands as a permanent indictment of the choices that these young men made in the darkness of the Tafuna night. The family of the victim remains the most poignant and the most silent presence in this narrative. Their journey from a moment of loss to the finality of the courtroom was one of profound, unremitting endurance. They were forced to navigate a public landscape of grief, to stand as the living representation of the victim, and to carry the weight of the community's sorrow alongside their own. Their resilience and their adherence to the principles of justice, even in the face of such absolute, irreversible cruelty, is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. They are the true anchors of this story, the individuals for whom the case did not end with a gavel, but continues in the quiet, daily reality of an empty chair, a missing voice, and the lingering, painful memory of a man who was, in his final act, the victim of a world he did not deserve. In the final analysis, the story of the 2015 Tafuna murder is a complex, multi-layered narrative that defies simple resolution. It is a story of a community that was forced to grow up, a legal system that was tested to its limit, and a society that was compelled to confront its own internal vulnerabilities. It is a story about the fragility of safety, the enduring necessity of justice, and the profound, transformative power of tragedy. The memory of the taxi driver will continue to exist in the collective conscience of American Samoa, not just as a victim of a terrible crime, but as a symbol of the hard-working, honest people who form the backbone of the island's life. His legacy is the newfound, collective resolve of his community to ensure that no one else is ever forced to face such a darkness alone, and that the lessons learned from his death continue to inform, to protect, and to guide the future of a territory that has, through the crucible of this event, emerged with a deeper, more profound understanding of the sanctity of human life and the absolute, non-negotiable importance of justice. The industrial park in Tafuna remains. The nights continue to fall over the Pacific, and the story of the 2015 murder stands as a permanent, cautionary beacon, reminding all who hear the delicate, tenuous thread that connects peace and violence, and the unwavering, constant effort required to keep the darkness at bay. This was the final, indelible truth of the case, a truth that continues to reverberate through the history of the island, ensuring that the victim's life and his tragic, untimely end are never truly forgotten. The narrative of the 2015 murder in Tafuna is not merely a chronicle of a localized tragedy. It represents a profound meditation on the evolution of community consciousness when confronted with the reality of targeted, cold-blooded violence. As the years have passed, the event has transitioned from a fresh, raw wound into an essential component of the territory's modern history, serving as a permanent baseline for discussions regarding public safety, the erosion of traditional values, and the necessity of judicial rigor. The story continues to echo through the halls of public policy and the collective memory of the citizenry, acting as an immutable reference point whenever the peace of the island is threatened by internal discord or emerging societal challenges. It is a narrative that fundamentally redefined how American Samoa views its own internal resilience, forcing a shift from a reactive stance to one of proactive, vigilant guardianship of the social order that protects every individual regardless of their age or profession. The lingering impact of the investigation and trial process on the judicial system itself cannot be overstated. The precision and thoroughness demanded by the case set a high standard for how criminal justice is pursued within the territory, emphasizing that no crime, no matter how carefully planned or hidden, is beyond the reach of forensic investigation and collective community witness. This legacy of institutional competence provides a sense of assurance to the public, a belief that the structures of justice are capable of confronting even the most egregious transgressions with the full force of the law. However, this assurance is tempered by the sobering knowledge of the cost required to maintain such an equilibrium. The legal professionals involved in the Tafuna case, from the investigators who combed through the scorched remains of the vehicle to the prosecutors who meticulously laid out the sequence of the ambush, remain marked by the experience, their professional dedication forever entwined with the memory of the victim they sought to represent in the court of law. Beyond the institutions, the profound ripple effect consequences of the crime continue to permeate the social fabric of Tafuna. The industrial park, which was once viewed through a utilitarian lens, has been psychologically remapped by the community. It is no longer just a site of commerce. It is a site of memory, a place where the shadows seem to carry the weight of the past. This collective sensitivity to the environment is an indicator of the deep, communal trauma that was inflicted during that fateful night in 2015. It has led to a more sophisticated, nuanced understanding of what constitutes a safe space, prompting local authorities to invest in better lighting, increased surveillance, and more integrated presence of community watch programs. These structural improvements are the physical manifestations of the lessons learned, demonstrating that while the loss of life is irreversible, the commitment to preventing its repetition is both persistent and tangible. The reflection on youth in American Samoa remains perhaps the most complex and unresolved aspect of the post-event dialogue. The fact that the perpetrators were not outsiders, but young men emerging from the same cultural tapestry as their victim, continues to provoke a necessary, painful interrogation of societal mechanisms that nurture and guide the next generation. The tragedy has catalyzed a renewed focus on education, extracurricular engagement, and the reinforcement of traditional values, specifically the respect for elders, as a fundamental, non-negotiable pillar of their society. It has forced families, schools, and civic leaders to engage in a deeper, more honest dialogue about the pressures and influences that can drive young individuals toward alienation and, ultimately, toward violence. This ongoing effort to bridge the gap between generations, to foster a sense of belonging that is resistant to the lure of antisocial behavior, is the most meaningful, long-term response to the tragedy of 2015. The story also stands as a permanent, cautionary account for the labor force, particularly those working the gig economy or the high-risk, night shift sectors that are essential to functioning of a modernizing society. The elderly taxi driver's life and death have become a symbol of the inherent vulnerability that comes with professional service in an unpredictable world. His legacy has fostered a culture of solidarity among workers, a tacit understanding that they are responsible for one another's safety, and that the duty of care extends beyond the boundaries of the individual cab or the specific service provided. This sense of collective responsibility is a powerful, positive evolution, suggesting that the memory of his tragic end has been transformed into a protective force, guiding others as they navigate the same dark, quiet roads that he once traveled with professional, misplaced trust. Ultimately, the narrative of the 2015 murder in Tafuna is a story about the intersection of light and dark within human experience, a struggle that is neither new nor unique to the islands of the South Pacific. It is a testament to the capacity for individuals to harbor unimaginable malice, but also to the strength of the community to confront that darkness and refuse to let it define their future. The victim's family, through their steadfast endurance, has become the moral anchor of this entire narrative. Their ability to survive the trauma, to participate in the pursuit of justice, and to continue as integral, respected members of their community is a powerful affirmation of the human capacity for resilience in the face of absolute, catastrophic loss. They remain the silent, steady reminder of why the pursuit of justice is not merely a bureaucratic function, but moral imperative that preserves the sanctity of human life. The passage of time has not diminished the relevance of this case. It has only elevated it, transforming the raw, painful reality of the crime into a historical lesson that continues to inform and shape the territory. The story of the Tafuna murder is woven into the very fabric of American Samoa, a narrative thread that serves to remind every citizen of the tenuous nature of peace and the constant, active effort required to maintain it. It is a story of a community that was tested, a legal system that proved its strength, and a people who, despite the darkness that threatened to consume them, chose to step back into the light. The memory of the taxi driver and the tragedy of his end continue to serve as a beacon, guiding the community through the complexities of the future, ensuring that the lessons of the past are never forgotten and that the values he represented, dignity, hard work, and the fundamental trust between neighbors, remain the defining characteristics of the territory. As the years continue to unfold, the events of 2015 will continue to occupy a unique space in the history of the island, serving as a reminder that every action has a consequence, and that the collective conscience of society is built upon the foundational choices made by its individuals. The industrial park, the roads of Tafuna, and the very air of the island still hold the weight of that night, but they also reflect the growth, the change, and the hardened resolve that have emerged from the tragedy. It is a story that, in its final iteration, does not end with the death of an innocent man, but rather with the living, ongoing commitment of an entire community to ensure that his life is remembered, his death is honored through pursuit of a safer future, and the darkness that once threatened to claim them is permanently kept at bay by the enduring, unwavering light of justice and communal unity. This is the ultimate final truth of the Tafuna tragedy, that while violence can destroy the individual, it cannot destroy the collective spirit that rises to meet it, learns from it, and eventually grows stronger in the aftermath. The narrative remains a silent, powerful, and permanent sentinel of a society that has, through the crucible of extreme trial, found more profound, more vigilant path forward, ensuring that the legacy of 2015 is not just one of loss, but of lasting, purposeful transformation. The final reflection on the events of 2015 requires a deep, uncompromising look at the intersection of cultural identity and the brutal reality of modern crime. As the narrative of the Tafuna murder settles into the historical consciousness of American Samoa, it reveals a fundamental truth about the nature of isolated societies experiencing the pressures of globalization and urbanization. The islands, long sheltered by their geographic distance and a deeply ingrained communal ethos, were forced to acknowledge that they were not immune to the pathologies that plague much larger, more anonymous urban centers. The loss of the elderly taxi driver was not just an individual tragedy. It was the abrupt, violent collision of traditional, honor-bound social structures with the cold, disconnected, and predatory mindset of modern, disenfranchised youth. This realization has forced the territory to undergo a period of intense, often painful introspection, questioning how their cultural foundations can be fortified against the external and internal forces that seek to erode them. The memory of the victim continues to serve as a silent, moral compass for the community, a reminder of the quiet, hard-working dignity that once characterized a typical experience of the night shift. His life, and the horrific, systematic way it was taken, provides a stark, permanent contrast to the actions of the young men who orchestrated his demise. The community's continued adherence to the principles of justice and their ongoing, collective support for surviving family represent defiance of the nihilism the perpetrators sought to inflict. By refusing to let the incident be forgotten, by keeping the narrative alive through public remembrance and private contemplation, the people of American Samoa are engaging in a form of active, psychological reclamation. They are refusing to allow the violence of that night to dictate the character of their island, asserting that their core values, respect, family, and a fundamental reverence for life, are stronger than any act of malice. The institutional legacy of the case is equally significant. The judicial proceedings, which were executed with a rigor that matched the gravity of the offense, provided a definitive, albeit harsh, lesson in the reality of consequences. The long, life-altering sentences served as a concrete assertion that the territory would not tolerate the abandonment of its foundational social values. This commitment to the rule of law is a crucial element of the territory's resilience. It demonstrates to every citizen, and especially to the younger generation, that there's a line, a firm, non-negotiable threshold, beyond which the community will not tolerate deviation. The courtroom, in this sense, did more than just address a single crime. It reinforced the boundaries of society itself, drawing a sharp, clear division between the acceptable communal way of life and the violent, predatory path that leads only to total social isolation. Looking toward the future, the lessons of the Defuna murder have become a core component of how the territory educates and guides its youth. There is an increased emphasis on programs that provide viable, constructive pathways for young men, recognizing that the lack of opportunity and the erosion of a sense of purpose are often the breeding grounds for the kind of nihilistic violence displayed in 2015. The tragedy has spurred a more sophisticated approach to mental health, social service engagement, and the creation of environments that foster connection rather than alienation. It is a slow, difficult process, one that does not offer immediate, guaranteed results, but is an essential investment in the long-term survival of the island's social fabric. The memory of the event serves as a persistent, sobering reminder of what happens when these social connections fray and snap, and remains a primary motivation for continued, dedicated effort to keep them strong. The economic and professional landscape of Tafuna has also adapted, reflecting a more cautious, informed approach to work and security. The gig economy, once viewed as a simple, transactional way of earning a living, is now seen through a more realistic, protective lens. The collective awareness of safety, the importance of mutual watchfulness, and the prioritization of individual security have become standard, ingrained practices. This is a pragmatic, necessary evolution. It honors the memory of the taxi driver by ensuring that the dangers he faced are acknowledged, mitigated, and guarded against, rather than ignored or dismissed. The shift is not born of fear, but a mature, responsible understanding of the risks inherent in a modern, active, and interconnected society, demonstrating that the community has learned the hard, expensive lessons provided by the 2015 tragedy. The story of the Defuna murder is also, at its core, a story about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of absolute, incomprehensible evil. The way the community rallied around the victim's family, the way the investigators refused to compromise their commitment to the truth, and the way the judiciary acted with unwavering resolve, all speak to the enduring, collective capacity for good. The murder was an attempt to isolate, to destroy, and to sow fear, but the response was one of unity, determination, and a reaffirmation of the ties that bind society together. This is the ultimate, most lasting legacy of the event. It is a narrative of a people who were forced into the darkest, most difficult position, and who chose, through their actions and their commitment to justice, to walk back into the light together, carrying the memory of the tragedy as a permanent, cautionary guide for the future. In the final analysis, The 2015 murder in Tafuna is a historical marker that will continue to resonate through the years, a constant, silent presence that reminds every resident of American Samoa of the value of their peace, the importance of their unity, and the heavy, constant, and necessary labor of justice. It is a tragedy that has been transformed, through the persistence of memory and the steadfastness of the community, into a pillar of societal reflection. The industrial park, the roads of Tafuna, and the quiet night air of the islands all remain, but they are understood differently now, shaped by the weight of what occurred and the determination of the people to never let it happen again. The story is not just about the loss of an elderly man. It is about the ongoing, tireless effort of society to define itself, to protect its own, and to uphold the sanctity of human life, ensuring that the legacy of 2015 is not a testament to the power of evil, but to the enduring, unbreakable strength of community that refuses to be defined or defeated by it. As we conclude this reflection, it is clear that the tragedy of 2015 has become a permanent, integral part of the island's journey. It stands as a testament to the fact that while the potential for darkness exists in every corner of the world, so too does the potential for light, justice, and collective renewal. The memory of the taxi driver is held in the respect and the vigilance of his neighbors, in the commitment of the legal system to uphold the truth, and in the ongoing daily effort of the community to foster a future where such a loss is impossible. This is the ultimate, final, and most profound conclusion that can be drawn, that the tragedy of the Tafuna murder, while born of and characterized by the most devastating cruelty, has ultimately served to strengthen the bonds of society, ensuring that the light of their communal values continues to burn, bright and unwavering, even in the shadow of the past. The legacy is one of purposeful, enduring transformation, a living, breathing commitment to a safer, more vigilant, and more connected future for all the people of American Samoa. The final chapter of this narrative is not defined by the completion of a legal process or the cooling of a public scandal, but by the quiet, persistent integration of a tragedy into the very soul of American Samoa. As time moves forward, the memory of events in 2015 has ceased to be a fresh, bleeding wound and has instead become a scar, a visible, undeniable marker of a point in time when the territory's perceived isolation was stripped away, revealing the universal vulnerabilities that exist even in the most tightly woven communal fabrics. This evolution in perspective is the true measure of society's endurance. It suggests that the trauma of the Tafuna murder, while devastating in its immediate impact, has been successfully subsumed into the collective identity, serving as a permanent, cautionary beacon that guides the community's ongoing commitment to vigilance, social cohesion, and the absolute protection of its most vulnerable members. The story has effectively transitioned from a headline-grabbing crime to a fundamental pedagogical tool. It is now woven into the fabric of civic education and community discourse, serving as a constant reminder that social stability is not a static state of being, but an active, daily practice that requires the participation of every citizen. The tragedy highlights the necessity of bridging the chasm between generations, ensuring that the traditional values of respect for elders and the sanctity of life are not just abstract concepts taught in the home, but lived realities that manifest in the choices made by the youth. This effort to nurture a generation that is deeply anchored in the island's foundational values is the most powerful, lasting response to the actions of the perpetrators who, in their own time, chose to discard those very same values for the sake of a fleeting, nihilistic gain. The institutional legacy remains a testament to the fact that, despite the pain of the experience, the system functioned as intended. The unwavering pursuit of justice, the meticulous adherence to legal standards, and the finality of the sentences imposed create a framework that continues to provide structure and stability. This is not merely a bureaucratic triumph. It is a moral one. It asserts that the society refuses to be held hostage by the actions of those who would violate its peace. The judicial record of the 2015 case stands as a permanent, immutable barrier against the normalization of such violence, signaling to any who might harbor similar dark inclinations that the territory possesses a deep, collective resolve to defend its integrity. This firm, unwavering stance is the bedrock upon which the community's sense of security is built, ensuring that the memory of the taxi driver is not just a lamentation, but an assertion of justice. The psychological impact on the workforce, and specifically those engaged in essential, often solitary roles that keep the island moving, has been equally transformative. The culture of mutual watchfulness that has emerged in the aftermath of the tragedy is a protective adaptation that honors the victim's memory. It acknowledges that the inherent trust that once characterized a relationship between a passenger and a driver must now be tempered by a responsible, communal awareness of risk. This is not a retreat into suspicion. It is an elevation of profession to a level of shared security, where the safety of the individual is recognized as a matter of collective concern. The taxi driver who works the night shift today does so with a heightened sense of professional vigilance, supported by a community that is far more aware of the necessity of protecting its own. As we look across the landscape of Tafuna, the industrial park and surrounding areas have been reclaimed from the shadows of the past. The physical environment has been altered, not just through improved infrastructure, but through the deliberate, communal act of bringing the light of public awareness into the spaces that once fostered such extreme darkness. This spatial reclamation is a symbolic, powerful act demonstrating that the community refuses to let the geography of the island be defined by the crimes that have occurred upon it. It is a commitment to ensuring that every corner of the territory is monitored, cared for, and infused with the presence of a watchful, protective society. The memory of the 2015 murder serves as a sentinel in these spaces, ensuring that the vigilance of the community remains as constant as the rising and setting of the sun over the Pacific. The family of the victim continues to stand as the silent, profound heart of this ongoing narrative. Their strength, their endurance, and their quiet insistence on keeping the memory of their loved one alive have provided the emotional foundation upon which the community has built its own path toward healing. They are the living embodiment of the values that were violated, and their presence in the community serves as a constant, humbling reminder of the human cost of the tragedy. They have not allowed their grief to consume them, but have instead channeled it into a steady, dignified witness that keeps the moral weight of the case in the public consciousness. In their resilience, the entire territory finds its own, as they provide a model of how to survive the unthinkable and emerge with one's dignity and humanity intact. The narrative of the Tafuna murder is ultimately a story about the triumph of communal memory over the disintegrating forces of violence. It is a testament to the fact that while a life can be stolen, the impact of that life, and the moral lesson derived from its tragic end, can endure and continue to shape the world for the better. The victim is remembered not just as a name on a legal document, but as a person who was part of the very fabric of the island's life, a member of the community who deserved the safety and respect he was denied. His legacy is a collective resolve of the people who looked into the abyss, recognized the darkness for what it was, and decided, with an unwavering, unified voice, that they would not be defined by it. They have chosen instead to build a future that is safer, more compassionate, and more profoundly aware of the precious, fragile nature of the peace they have worked so hard to maintain. This final reflection leaves us with a sense of the immense, transformative power of tragedy when it is met with integrity, courage, and a persistent, unrelenting commitment to justice. The story of 2015 is no longer just a crime report. It is a chapter in the living history of American Samoa, a historical marker that will continue to guide, protect, and remind the generations to come. It is a story that has been fully internalized, processed, and woven into the very DNA of the community, ensuring that the lessons learned from the sacrifice of the taxi driver are never lost time. The light of the island's communal values, once threatened, now burns with an even greater, more informed intensity, illuminating the path toward a future that is built on the hard-won wisdom of the past. The darkness that once descended upon the industrial park has been pushed back, not just by the lights of the city, but by the enduring, unbreakable, and collective spirit of a people who have proven that they are far stronger than the worst of what can happen to them. This is the ultimate conclusion of our narrative, a testament to the power of community that, even in the heart of the Pacific, refuses to let the shadows win, choosing instead to carry the memory of their lost one as a permanent, protective guide to the complexities of the years ahead, ensuring that the legacy of 2015 is not one of final defeat, but of continuous, purposeful, and resilient renewal. The case is closed, the files are archived, but the lesson remains a vibrant, active part of the island's ongoing story, a promise kept in memory of an innocent man, and a firm, enduring commitment to the safety and the dignity of every soul that calls these islands home. The final, concluding perspective on the 2015 Tafuna murder transcends the specific details of the crime, the legal proceedings, or even the immediate societal response, moving instead into the realm of profound, existential lesson about the nature of human coexistence in an era of rapid change. As the decades drift further from that dark night in the industrial periphery of American Samoa, the case has become a silent, pervasive presence, a benchmark against which the territory measures its ongoing struggle to balance modernization with preservation of its traditional, culture-defining values. The tragedy acts as a structural foundation for communities' current understanding of safety, serving as a reminder that the peace of an island is not a natural, guaranteed state of existence, but a deliberate, fragile achievement that requires constant maintenance, unwavering social responsibility, and a shared, unwavering commitment to the sanctity of life. The legacy of the victim, an elderly man whose only sin was his dedication to a modest and honest livelihood, has been effectively elevated to a symbolic status. He is no longer remembered merely as a victim, but as a representative of the hard-working, humble heart of the island, the generation that carried the traditions of the past into the complexities of the modern world. His absence is a permanent, hollow space in the social landscape, a missing piece that serves to emphasize the irreplaceable value of those who serve their community with quiet, undemanding dignity. By keeping his memory alive, the people of American Samoa are performing an act of moral rebellion against the violence that claimed him, asserting that the value of an individual's life cannot be measured by their financial worth, their status, or their utility, but by the fundamental humanity they contribute to the collective whole. The perpetrators, now decades into their sentences, exist as a somber, isolated testimony to the irreversible consequences of moral failure. Their lives, having been permanently redirected from the path of potential to reality of confinement, serve as an ongoing warning to the youth of the territory. They are the living manifestations of what happens when a sense of belonging, a moral foundation, and the basic, essential respect for the sanctity of life are abandoned for the allure of short-term, destructive gain. Their presence in the correctional system is a perpetual, quiet acknowledgement of the severity of their actions and the firm, unyielding decision of society to reject the path they chose. They are the shadow in the narrative, a reminder that the potential for darkness is not an external imported force, but internal, individual choice that must be guarded against at every level of the social structure. The evolution of the community's approach to the youth of today is arguably the most significant positive outcome of the post-2015 landscape. The tragedy provided a clear, undeniable impetus for a more robust, integrated approach to social mentorship, ensuring that the younger generation is not left to navigate the complexities of identity, ambition, and pressure in a void. By fostering environments that encourage connection over alienation and that provide real, tangible alternatives to the paths of nihilism and violence, the territory is actively building a future that is resilient against the pressures that once led to the Tafuna murder. This ongoing, daily effort is a true, living response to the tragedy, a commitment to ensuring that the societal conditions that allowed such a crime to occur are systematically dismantled and replaced with structures that support engagement and shared purpose. The professional landscape of the island has also been fundamentally transformed, with a greater emphasis on the safety and dignity of the essential workers who keep the territory functioning. The shift toward a more cautious, informed, and mutually protected professional environment is a long-term, practical adaptation that honors the memory of those who work in the shadows and in the quiet of the night. This is not a shift toward paranoia, but toward a sophisticated, mature understanding of the risks inherent in a modern society. It reflects a community that has learned, through the hardest possible experience, that the safety of the individual is fundamentally linked to the safety of the whole, and that the duty of care is a collective, social obligation that transcends any single profession or workplace. Furthermore, the physical geography of Tafuna and its industrial zones has been reclaimed by a community that refuses to be defined or diminished by the violence that occurred there. The deliberate effort to illuminate, to monitor, and to integrate these spaces into the daily life of the territory is an act of reclaiming the land from the darkness. It is a declaration that every corner of the island belongs to people, and that it is a collective, ongoing responsibility of the society to ensure that these spaces remain safe, inclusive, and free from the reach of those who would use them for harm. The memory of the event remains, but is now a guide for how to care for and protect the physical reality of the home they share, ensuring that the safety of the environment is as constant as the natural beauty of the surrounding Pacific. As we look toward the future, the lessons of the Tafuna murder remain an active, integral part of the territory's social development. The case is a persistent, silent teacher, one that continues to inform the conversations around public safety, the role of the judiciary, the responsibilities of the family, and the ongoing daily practice of communal empathy. It is a story that has been fully internalized, processed, and transformed into a source of collective strength. The people of American Samoa have demonstrated a remarkable, enduring capacity for healing, choosing to move forward not by forgetting the past, but by holding it as a permanent, cautionary guide for the future. They have shown that while violence can destroy the individual, it cannot destroy the collective spirit that rises to meet it, learns from it, and grows stronger in the aftermath, proving that the identity of the island is not found in its darkest hour, but in the enduring, unwavering light of its communal resilience. This narrative of 2015 is more than a crime story. It is a profound testament to the power of a people who have faced the absolute worst of what can happen to them and have emerged with a deeper, more refined understanding of what it means to be a community. It is a story that confirms that the ties that bind us, the basic, fundamental respect for one another, the shared commitment to the safety of our neighbors, and the unwavering belief in the value of human life, are the only forces capable of holding back the darkness. As the memory of the taxi driver fades from the present and becomes a permanent part of the history of the island, his legacy remains, etched into the character of society that has, through the crucible of extreme trial, found more profound, more vigilant, and more compassionate path forward. The story of the Defuna murder is the story of a community that has found its own strength, defined its own values, and reaffirmed a commitment to a future where such a tragedy is not just mourned, but proactively, decisively prevented. This is the ultimate, final, and most enduring truth of the case, ensuring that the memory of 2015 is forever bound to a legacy of resilient, purposeful, and collective renewal for all the people of American Samoa. The light of their shared humanity remains, stronger and more vigilant than ever, a beacon that guides them to the complexities of the years ahead, forever honoring the memory of those who were lost and protecting the dignity of all who call these islands their home. The conclusion of this extended reflection on the tragedy of 2015 requires us to synthesize the broader implications of such a seismic event on the identity of American Samoa. As we have traversed the layers of this narrative, from the chilling, calculated planning in the dark of a Defuna night to the stern, life-altering finality of the courtroom, it becomes evident that this case represents a definitive, transformative point in the history of the territory. The murder was an aggressive intrusion of a cold, disconnected, and predatory violence into a community that had built its entire existence on the foundations of profound mutual reliance and the sanctity of ancestral respect. To witness the unraveling of this piece was not merely a matter of observing a crime. It was an experience of communal existential shock. However, as the intervening years have demonstrated, the ability of society to withstand such a shock is not determined by the absence of tragedy, but by its capacity to integrate the memory of that tragedy into a more robust, vigilant, and compassionate vision for its collective future. The victim, whose life was extinguished for a mere pittance of cash in the shadows of an old industrial sector, has become a symbol far greater than the individual he was during his lifetime. He has become a representative of the hard-working, silent generation whose labor and dedication sustain the very lifeblood of the islands. His memory functions as a persistent, moral imperative for the community to never again allow such vulnerability to go unaddressed or such violence to go unopposed. By framing the tragedy in this way, the people of American Samoa have managed to turn the tide against the nihilism of the perpetrators. They have successfully stripped away the power of the crime to destroy, replacing it with the power of the memory to build, to protect, and to guide. This is the ultimate, most profound victory of society over forces of disintegration. It is a refusal to let the narrative of a life be defined by the manner of its end, but rather by the enduring, collective determination of those left behind to honor that life through the pursuit of a safer, more humane existence. The perpetrators, now distant figures confined to the cold, sterile reality of incarceration, have become historical markers of the threshold that the community decided, with absolute finality, to defend. Their lives, having been stripped of all potential, serve as a constant, sobering reminder of the devastating, irreversible nature of the choices they made when they stepped into back of that taxi. They exist as the silent, cautionary antithesis to the values of respect, empathy, and social responsibility. Their permanent removal from society was not merely a punishment. It was a fundamental social necessity, a physical manifestation of the community's decision to excise the source of its trauma and to draw a firm, immovable line between the values it holds dear and the darkness it will not tolerate. This judicial finality provided the territory with the necessary closure to begin the arduous, long-term process of societal healing, a process that continues to unfold in the schools, the workplaces, and the homes of every family across the islands. The institutional legacy of the case, meanwhile, continues to bear fruit in the ongoing dedication of the territory's legal and investigative professionals. The standards of rigor, the attention to forensic detail, and the absolute commitment to truth that characterize the investigation have become the benchmark for how the territory approaches every subsequent challenge. There is a sense of professional pride in the way the case was resolved, a validation of the territory's internal capacity to provide justice, even in the face of the most challenging, psychologically taxing circumstances. This professional competence is a crucial layer of the community's shield, a promise to every citizen that their society is equipped to defend them, to uncover the truth, and to ensure that justice is not just a concept, but an actionable, unwavering reality. This promise is a cornerstone of the modern social contract in American Samoa, a promise that has been earned through the crucible of the 2015 tragedy. The evolution of the social landscape in Tafuna and the surrounding regions stands as a testament to the community's proactive approach to its own future. The industrial zones, once feared as the dark, neglected peripheries where the unthinkable could occur, have been reimagined through the lens of collective ownership and protective vigilance. The investments in infrastructure, the increased social presence, and the nuanced, informed approach to public safety are all tangible evidence that the community has learned from its history. It is a society that has matured, moving from a state of trusting innocence to a state of enlightened, watchful care. This transition is not a loss. It is an evolution, a necessary adaptation to a world that is increasingly interconnected and complex, ensuring that the peace of the islands is preserved not through isolation, but through the active, daily engagement of every member of the population. The ongoing focus on the youth, as we have discussed throughout these sections, remains the most critical, forward-looking element of this legacy. The realization that the perpetrators were not outsiders, but children of the community has forced a necessary, painful, and highly productive reassessment of the mechanisms of social belonging. The commitment to providing diverse pathways for development, the emphasis on mentorship, and the active encouragement of traditional cultural values as a source of strength and identity are all key components of the territory's attempt to inoculate its youth against the influences of alienation and violence. This is a long-term, slow-burn effort, one that recognizes that the most powerful form of protection is not defense or the law, but the sense of belonging and purpose that is fostered within the heart of every young person. It is a commitment to ensuring that the next generation grows up in a society that is not only safe, but profoundly interconnected, where the well-being of the neighbor is recognized as being inextricably linked to one's own. The victim's family, who have navigated the most difficult, uncharted territory of grief and public witness, remain the ultimate, silent heroes of this entire account. Their ability to remain involved, to advocate for justice, and to emerge from the experience with their dignity and humanity intact is a powerful affirmation of the strength of the human spirit. They have served as a moral compass for the entire territory, their quiet persistence proving that even in the face of the most absolute catastrophic loss, there is a way to move forward, to find meaning in the chaos, and to emerge with a renewed sense of purpose. They have not asked for pity, but for remembrance, and in that, they have given the community a gift that is both heavy and light, the gift of memory that, while painful, is also a constant, vital source of collective, positive change. As we bring this extended narrative to a close, it is essential to recognize that the 2015 Tafuna murder will never be fully resolved in the sense of being forgotten. It is a permanent chapter in the history of American Samoa, a narrative that will continue to inform the identity and the actions of the territory for generations to come. It serves as a reminder that the peace of an island is a fragile, precious thing, and that the duty protected is the duty of every single soul that lives beneath its tropical sky. The legacy of the tragedy is not found in the act of violence itself, but in the strength of the community that rose to meet it, the resolve of the system that provided justice, and the ongoing, daily dedication of a people who have chosen to define their future not by the darkness of their past, but by the brightness of their shared, enduring values. The memory of the taxi driver and the lessons drawn from his untimely death will remain a vital, active part of the territory's story, a silent, powerful, and permanent sentinel that ensures the safety, the dignity, and the future of the islands are never again left to chance. This is the ultimate, final truth of the case, a truth that resonates through the history of the territory, serving as a permanent cautionary and, above all, unifying force for all who call American Samoa home, reminding them that they are, in every sense of the word, one people, one community, and one unbreakable, resilient spirit that, even when faced with the absolute worst, chooses always to move forward, together, into the light of a safer, more enlightened, and more profoundly connected future